This episode is sponsored by global sports and entertainment agency, Octagon. For more than 40 years, Octagon has delivered award-winning campaigns and led sponsorship strategy, experiential programs, and athlete partnerships for brands like the Home Depot, Delta Airlines, MasterCard, Nutrafol, and NBA 2K. The agency drives impact across women's sports and major global events such as the World Cup and the Olympics. Learn more at octagon.com and on social media at Octagon.
John Moore retired as CEO from IPG's Mediahub earlier this year, and a few months earlier, Trudy Hardy left a long career in automotive, which included a stint as North American CMO at BMW. Both seemed headed to full-time retirement until Hassan Ramusovic convinced them both to join his consultancy, Harmonium, which services both clients and agencies. So what pulled Hardy and Moore back to the industry? This is EJ Schultz, news editor at Ad Age, and we answer that question on this week's Marketer's Brief podcast. Moore and Hardy also weigh in on Omnicom's IPG acquisition, including what it signals for the industry. And they offer practical advice on how clients and agencies can get along better. Plus, we get their perspective on AI, including how it is changing the CMO's job and what agencies can do to help. And now my conversation with John and Trudy. John, Trudy, welcome to the Marketer's Brief podcast.
Thank you, EJ. So nice to see you again.
Yes, thank you, EJ. Pleasure to be here.
So you both left successful careers in the marketing industry, seemingly headed for retirement not long ago, and now you've resurfaced at Harmonium. So my question is, why did you decide to make this move? And give me a quick read on what Harmonium does and how it's different from other consultancies in the space. John, if you want to start.
Yeah, sure. I'll start and then I'll turn it over to Trudy. I think I was ready for retirement, but I guess I wasn't ready for retirement. So when Hassan called, I had known Hassan for a long, long time. I think I was interested in bringing kind of my knowledge on the agency side and making the matchmaking process better because I had seen a lot of good pitches and I had seen a lot of bad pitches. And I think the one thing I said to myself is harmony is not congruent with where the world is, with where our business is. And I think we could all agree that the world needs more harmony. So this was just something that was really, really appealing to me.
I'll build on that a little bit and I'll use a little bit of an automotive pun. In my retirement, I was ready to shift gears and I was ready to do something just a little bit different. And I had worked with Hassan at Hassan & Co. years ago. And I think he brought a really interesting perspective in this really important relationship business. And there are very few people that I would come out of retirement to work for, but he really has a repair before replace philosophy at Harmonium. And that was really conducive to the way I approached making sure your relationship with your agency works before you go into the search business. So
and we're going to dig into some of those details in a little bit. But first, I cannot ignore the news that everyone's talking about, which is Omnicom's acquisition of IPG. As we're recording this, the deal finalized just a few days ago. So, John, obviously you had a long career at IPG. Curious to get your take on the deal and what it might say overall about the industry right now.
Yeah, it's a good question. We could probably do a 2-hour podcast on that alone, but we won't. I mean, first, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't say that we all should have tremendous empathy for the many, many people and the many good people that are now looking for a job. So I wanted to start there. Many of them are friends. But second, listen, this 100% made sense. It was the right deal to make. A lot of people say that scale isn't important anymore. You know what? If you're a Fortune 100 company, scale is important. Scale gives you leverage. Scale allows you to invest in more things. This was a data play. Listen, I'm not breaking this news. Axiom was something that Omnicom was missing from their portfolio, feels a big gap. This was a buying power play, principal-based buying. is tremendously important to the holding companies. And I guess at the end of the day, when you work for a holding company, you answer to shareholders, and that's just the truth. And if I were a shareholder, I would absolutely bless this IPG Omnicom deal. It was a good deal for both parties.
Trudy, that's the perspective from a longtime agency person. As someone who has been on the client side for a lot of years, how do you read this deal? What would it mean if you were a client at either Omnicom or IPG?
I won't repeat all of the great points that John makes in terms of the benefit and the scale of what this deal brings to the table. But as the former CMO of BMW and IPG, as my stronghold client in that space, I wouldn't say that I'm a bit nervous for clients. I mean, this is an enormous merger. And I think, we're going to get into this subject, but there's a relationship at the core of this. And I worry about the ability of the relationship side of this getting lost in something so big. And, sometimes scale comes at the expense of certain clients to benefit other clients. And I felt some of those pain points over the course of the years. So I would say that I'd still be a little bit nervous if I was sitting in the CMO seat of one of these Fortune 100 companies.
Last question on this topic. There's so many angles to this story. I guess one of them is the idea of potential conflicts now. Some folks say that's not a big deal anymore in the industry. It used to be a sacred thing, right? One agency would not have more than one automotive client, for instance. That was a big one. Do you think that still matters? And are they going to have to navigate this now that you see everything under this one large company?
I think it still matters, but I think that you're right, EJ, that it matters less. And I think there is the ability to separate those teams that are working on the business. So it still matters to me. I mean, there's still a lot of cross-pollination, but if we're honest, I mean, agency individuals jump from account to account, whether they're within the same group or not. So I mean, it's always a concern, but less so, I think, for me.
John, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, from somebody who's dealt with conflicts on the agency side, none of it is rational. It's all emotional. It's up to the individual client. I do think clients worry about it, but I think clients worry more about keeping the team that they love. And if you can make a strong firewall argument and you get this team you love, most clients, not all, but most clients will kind of psychologically get their head around, you know what, I'll live with this.
All right, moving on to some of the work you guys are doing at Harmonium. Trudy, when you joined, I read on your LinkedIn, you said that finding harmony between clients and their agency partners is the top priority. So my question for you is, what is the biggest thing right now standing in the way of this harmony between clients and agencies?
Oh boy. I mean, my gut instinct is to say the client, and I know I shouldn't say that as a client, but I think there's a lot of burden that's put on the agency partner, right? In terms of delivering the results. And I think we really need to look at this as a joint relationship. Trust feeds everything in this business, right? Between a client and an agency partner. And I think that it's too easy for a client to put the burden of that responsibility of holding the relationship together on the agency partner. So I think that that's an easy out for clients.
John, do you want to chime in here? As someone who's been servicing clients for many years in your previous career, like what would be some practical advice on how clients can be better clients?
Yeah. It's interesting, and not to make this a hard sell for Harmonium, but one of the things that I did like about what Hassan was doing is Hassan goes into a relationship, and if a client comes to us and they say, listen, I need a new agency, one of the first things we will do is we will look at the client also. And I think that's somewhat refreshing versus, yep, it's all the client's fault. Let's go into a review. And I think to answer your question, there's a variety of things. Maybe I'll just kind of start with one that I think is incredibly important that gets screwed up in the new business process, and that's staffing. I mean, we all know how it works. You pitch a piece of business, it comes down to two agencies, and then it just seems like marketing hands everything over to procurement. And it's whoever does it cheaper will ultimately win the business. Now, I know that might be a little bit hyperbolic. Maybe that's not totally how it works. But trust me, as somebody who's gone through the gauntlet with procurement, I have seen this happen again and again. And I would say to a CMO, take the long view, don't take the short view. Because what procurement will do is they will knock hours down, they will knock positions down. And 6 months later, you're going to be on all sorts of trouble because you don't have enough people working on the business. So if I gave one and only one bit of advice to a CMO, I'd say in the new business process, work side by side with procurement and get that staff right. You should know how many people and what the talent is to run your business successfully. Just don't hand that over to procurement. And you know what? Maybe pay a little bit more because it's going to get you so much more down again, 6, 12, 18 months down the road.
Trudy, have you ever run into that in your previous career, and how have you handled something like that?
A time or two. And I completely 100% agree with John on this particular topic. And if we could commoditize work like that, and put that price per digital piece, 30-second ad, you are paying for people. You are paying for the quality and the caliber of the people. You want to be the number one client on that agency's roster, and you want to make sure that you are drawing the best people to your business. And he's absolutely right, because you're going to get exactly what you pay for. And if they bring those rates down, you're going to suffer in some way.
But from the client's perspective, back to our earlier point, we were talking about the Omnicom deal. I mean, as we're seeing, fewer agencies out there, amidst all this consolidation, the reality is there's only a finite number of top people at each agency. So if you're like a mid-market client, smaller client, isn't the reality is you're probably not going to get the top people? Or how do you go about negotiating that if you're in that position?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right, but I think for maybe a mid-sized company, that John's probably better suited to answer it from this perspective, but I would look at that they're going to get, I think, the biggest advantages of something like this in terms of that scale and what you're able to deliver. I think I worry more for the bigger clients on an agency roster with a merger of this size, but I think, John, you'd probably be better served to answer that part of the question.
Yeah, one of the things, and I applaud clients for this. I think maybe I saw the shift, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago. You know, you go into a new business pitch, and obviously you want your strongest presenters because there is theater and we are human. And clients tend to be drawn to powerful, articulate presenters. Even if they know that some of these people will never spend any time on their business, even if they award that agency the business. I think clients have wised up to that. And I think the more and more I see is we want the people that will work on our business. So I applaud them for that. I think that's the right thing to do. I would do that if I was a client. So can you get the A team as a mid-level client at a giant holding company? I don't think there's a yes or no answer to that, EJ, to be perfectly honest with you, because I think some, agencies don't value clients just on how much money they're making, even though that's very important, or how big the brand is. They will overservice brands that allow them to do great work. They're in kind of a real cool category. So there's lots of kind of intangibles on how an agency decides to put their A team on the account and overservice the account. And it's not always on how much money you spend.
I totally agree with that. I mean, if I reflect back on my career and I think about the launch of Mini within the big world of BMW, that was a shining star at a fraction of the budget. But the risks that we had to take and to, really step out of that box was also a pinnacle on, an agency's roster. And it wasn't about the money we spent, but the work that we created. You're absolutely right, John.
We'll be back after this quick break.
Support for this episode comes from global sports and entertainment agency Octagon. For more than 40 years, Octagon has helped brands and athletes connect with fans through sponsorship strategy, experiential activations, and standout creative content. Recently named Sports Business Journal's 2025 Agency of the Year for Brand Consulting, the agency continues to shape the industry with ideas that spark conversation and push sports marketing forward. Learn more at octagon.com and on social media at Octagon.
So we talked earlier about sort of what, the clients can do better to create these more harmonious relationships, maybe taking some control back from procurement. What about the agency side? Like, what are some things that you're seeing out there that agencies could really do differently, whether it's in the pitch process or in just the day-to-day running of the account, that might create a better relationship? John, I'll start with you on this one.
Okay, I mean, I'll just say one thing because I'll shoot this over to Trudy, but I used to always say to my teams, the client will ask you, let's say for 5 things. Let's say they ask you for 5 big deliverables in the span of a week, and you deliver those 5 deliverables and you do it outstanding. I would say to the people, do you think you're doing a great job? And they would say, yes, I delivered these 5 things. I did them perfectly. Of course, I'm doing a great job. And I would say, no, you're not. What are you delivering to the client that they're not asking for, that they're not thinking about? That's what separates great agencies from good agencies and great people from good people. So where I always pushed my people were deliver things that the client isn't thinking about, isn't asking for, because that's when the client, and I'll be interested to get Trudy's perspective on this, says, okay, now I know I've got the right person and the right team.
No, you're right, John, because I think we're so focused on scope, the scope of work, the deliverables, right, that we are, required and our KPIs that are measured against that. So you're right that what are you doing to move my business forward? And I'll break this up into, immerse yourself in my business, not just the marketing of the products and or the services, but get to know as many clients as possible. The best compliment I could get is having a team of internal clients and external marketing partners at the table and not knowing the difference as to who works for BMW in this case and who works for our agency partner. And I think that that's when really, really great work comes. And the second part of what I would say is good ideas come from anywhere, which is even the clients sometimes. And our best work usually was a result of an ideation session where a good idea was built into a great idea with both partners harmoniously working together.
Do you feel that agencies have, I hear this a lot, that they may not always have the right grasp of what KPIs, what metrics really matter to brands? Do you see that a lot, and how can that be fixed?
This is such a sweet spot for me. And again, if I was telling a CMO one thing, yes, I think, what does success look like? It's such a simple question. And there's been studies, there's been Forrester studies, there's been IBM studies that sometimes the CMO's priorities and how the CMO is measuring success isn't how the CFO and the CEO is measuring success. And if I start a relationship, I'd want to know, with no disrespect to the CMO, I would ask the CMO, well, how does the CEO and CFO, what are their KPIs? What do you look at every single day? Because clients look at that stuff every single day. I mean, imagine if you're a client from Walmart, you're looking at those numbers probably on an hourly basis. We want access to that. And what I would say if I were a CMO is give the agency access to the CFO and CEO once a year. Not every day, but just a sit down, listen to the CEO say, listen, this is what I told the street. This is what success looks like. How can you help me deliver this kind of success?
John, you're absolutely right. And I would say that a real friction point for the client is probably the internal friction or tension that comes in those KPIs. If you were to ask my CEO or my COO or my CFO, it's going to be sales. It's going to be, how many leads we get. It's going to be the hard quantitative part of that. But I, as the master of the brand and the guardian of the brand, also looks for some of the softer side in that. And that is making your brand one of the most memorable that are out there. And some of those intangible KPIs, there's internal friction on, allowing them to rise to the surface. So I think there's a lot of dissent on the client side to try to get both sides of that equation working, qualitative metrics and quantitative metrics. metrics. When's the last time somebody remembered a $2.99 ad for, a mid-sized sedan, right? So getting that memorability in there is something I think that CMOs struggle with in an organization.
Yeah, I hear that a lot too. Do you have any tips or anything you've learned on how to communicate that to the rest of the C-suite if you're in the CMO's office?
Well, okay, I don't work for them anymore, so maybe this would be better. But sometimes it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. So I think you have to balance both sides. If I'm honest, right? I mean, we need to be held accountable for some of those really hard-hitting KPIs, but we also need to remember that there's an emotional component in this that you just can't measure, and that you need to make sure that you're always keeping top of mind.
Last topic before we go, AI. And I want to phrase it this way, as you guys are working with clients and agencies, what's the biggest ask brands have right now of agencies when it comes to AI? What are they asking to be solved?
Boy, that's a really interesting question, because I think, truth be told, I'm kind of doing some consulting with an AI company. So I have an interesting perspective of this. I think that clients and CMOs are still struggling with that question, to be perfectly honest with you. I think AI, it's just this catch-all and it's the buzzword. I think there was an interesting IBM study that showed that 80% of all CMOs say that AI is going to be a game changer. Those are strong words, but only 20% know how to implement it. I think simplistically, this is what CMOs want, and they think that AI can be a solution to this. They want things faster, they want things cheaper, and they want things more granular. Faster results, faster data, faster optimization, cheaper optimization. And if it can be faster, better, cheaper, and AI can help them deliver on those three colloquial words, that's what they want from AI in my mind. Now it's up to agencies to simplify AI and to tell clients how AI can deliver on those three things.
Trudy, do you agree with that?
I do agree with that. And I think, you use the word like catch-all, and I think that we are still trying to figure this out. But I think that AI, even if it's in its infancy, and I'll call it that right now, right? We're still on the cusp of really trying to exploit this, is amazing. And it can help all of those things that John is talking about, right? It can help make things faster. It can help make things more efficient. Cheaper, I don't know. I think yes, right? But I think that the agencies and clients that embrace it wholeheartedly are going to gain more from this than those that don't. But I will say, EJ, that we can't forget that there's still an emotional human factor that has to feed this. It has to, and that's not going to go away. And I think it's just going to enable us to better utilize our time and use AI to make some of those things faster and more turnkey.
The only last thing I'll say on AI, EJ, and this is something for all of us to follow, if I may offer my humble opinion on maybe something Ad Age should follow and is already following, is I do think that AI might allow more and more clients to in-house things. In-housing, sometimes it's expensive, it's complicated, it feels like a headache. But AI might allow clients to take more control, and that could be a big watch out for the industry also.
Okay, well, we'll have to leave it there.
Thanks, EJ.
Thank you, EJ.
That was John Moore and Trudy Hardy of Harmonium. My name is EJ Schultz, news editor at Ad Age. I want to thank our producer, Lauren Ciardio, and invite everyone to subscribe to the Marketer's Brief podcast on your favorite channel. We will catch you next time.
Marketer's Brief listeners get $40 off an adage.com subscription. Sharpen your marketing edge and visit adage.com/brief for your discount.